Welcome back to the main stage at Event Tech Live, USA and Canada 2021. Don't forget to contact us on social media, hashtag ETL21 and hashtag show us your setup. But right now, it's on to the next session and a keynote, Event Tech on Trial, a journey through the years at South by Southwest, featuring Scott Wilcox. But first, Will Curran from Endless Events should be joining us on the line now.
I'm happy to be here, James. Good to see you again.
Fantastic to see you. Fantastic to hear your voice again, my friend. Thanks for being here. I'm going to hand the baton over to you, and I'll see you back at the end of your session with Scott. Over to you, Will.
Thank you so much, James. Yeah, we're going to want to jump right on into this because there's so much good stuff to cover. I don't even know how we're going to have enough time for it because, Scott is just so incredible. I've had so many conversations with him, and just hearing his story, I said, we got to stop because everyone's going to be so excited to be able to hear from Scott. So I don't even want to waste time introducing we just got to dive into this right away. So everyone in the chat, really quick, make some noise. Oh, thank you all, by the way, for the comments on my beard. I appreciate it. I did get a haircut. So yes, everyone in the chat, make some noise for Scott Wilcox coming and joining us. Scott is the former Chief Innovation Officer of South by Southwest. If you haven't heard about South by Southwest, you're about to see how this event seriously impacted event tech forever and how Scott helped propel a lot of it. But also, as well, Scott has a new venture, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit. Here and Tomorrow is as called. And I haven't had a chance to talk about what the future entails for Scott. But man, this guy, if you're looking for a true innovator in event tech, like, this is it. So, Scott, let's make some noise for Scott in the chat. Put some ones and zeros in the chat. Let's hear it for Scott. Scott, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for the wonderful intro. And hello, everybody. It's really exciting to be able to talk to you today. So I'm looking forward to the story.
Well, what's cool about this story too is that you have just moved on from South by into some new innovative stuff that you're working on, which I'm sure we'll get to. But I thought this was a great moment for us to reflect on your long journey because the history that you have experienced at South by is just it's incredible. Like I just feel like I'm just teasing everybody the story that is to come.
So where should I start? At the beginning?
Well, let's start with this. So I think that my first kind of question to kind of kick it off is that everybody hears South by and thinks like, oh my gosh, insanely innovative. Like you guys had the first 4K live stream. You guys have been doing beacons and RFIDs before that was even known within the events industry. You've constantly pushed on. But for a lot of people, they think, well, yeah, there's no way my event will be like South by, right? So, but when you started, South by wasn't even thinking about technology. In fact, when you joined South by, you said they didn't even have an email like server. They were using like what? Can you explain like those early days of what it started like, and kind of let everyone know on what it was like in the beginning?
Okay, so I started at South by Southwest in 1996. So I'm sure I'm dating myself here, but it was a time where they had really put this vision together. You know, they had started as a music industry event, and just 2 years earlier, they had started the film festival and a multimedia event at the time, which was largely focused on CD-ROMs, kind of in that phase of things. And when I started there, my first job was like opening the mail and entering the data from the registration forms. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way. And so, very quickly, I realized how the aspirations of the company and the technology that was inside the company was really misaligned. So, we had this aspiration to create this worldwide event, very international, all over the world. And we just didn't really have the infrastructure to do it. So I started small by creating a relational database system, pulling that in. I pulled the website in-house, built out the website, started doing all the blogging, and started incorporating digital video in the year 2000 and an audio program. And it was really like there was this moment in technology and the event industry, event tech wasn't really a thing. So because we had these aspirations, we decided to build it ourselves. It was kind of the only solution we had. So I hired programmers, built a program around that. And as we floated through the years, we saw a lot of returns on our early adoption of technology, particularly as it aligned with the community we were trying to cultivate. We wanted this, this multimedia event turned into interactive, and the web really made things take off. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the environment and the technology for your audience, you're not going to succeed.
Ooh, interesting. So when you first started, did you consider yourself a technology guy before all this?
I was an English literature major and psychology, but I knew about computers. I grew up with computers, and it was, the zeitgeist of the time. It was kind of, early days of the web, and anybody can build a website. And so I just started pursuing this path, and I was passionate about events. I had produced concerts and films and did some playwriting all through high school and college. And I knew that I loved creating shared experiences. And I found this company that had just started to sort of do that. And, they had done it a number of years, but not at that scale, and had this ambition of convergence. And I thought to myself, what an incredible canvas to innovate with. I'm just going to keep pushing the boundaries. And we saw immediate returns on that in terms of the community that started to find South by Southwest as a home internationally.
Well, I think this is a good point for everybody out there, because I think like the number one thing I hear when it comes to getting involved in technology is like, I'm not a technology person. It's like kind of the biggest hesitance to it. So if you feel like you're that person right now watching this going, I feel like technology is overwhelming, stay tuned, because obviously if Scott can do it as an English literature major, you can do it too. So I'm curious to know, like when you start talking about community and kind of the early days of getting that return, what was kind of the biggest impacts in terms of the evolution of technology? So sounds like the website and kind of doing some content and building the brand for South by was probably one of the first steps. Sure. What other technologies did you start implementing that had the biggest impact on that ROI?
That's a great question, Will. I think that, aside from, it was very, the late 90s when we started doing online registration and we started doing online submissions. We weren't living in an age of software as a service, right? There weren't event technology companies that I could really go to and say, hey, I've got this event, what do you have for me? So we built it, but very quickly I started pivoting towards audio and video, and really, very much embracing sort of content creation from the event. And I know that this is a common thing that event producers think about. They think, well, if I put out all this content, we were putting it out for free on top of the event. Will I cannibalize my ticket sales? Will I sort of really, create an issue for myself there? And what we saw was the more content we were free from the event, the larger the event grew itself, the more tickets we sold. So it sounds almost counterintuitive, and it did require a leap of faith, but I demonstrated that early on because the reach of content through digital is so phenomenal. So I think that is an easy thing that people can start doing right away, is capturing the video, capturing the audio, putting out podcasts. These are, you've got this content moment, this shared experience, and it's a way to extend that and to sort of build on the community. So we saw a huge return on that, such that we just continued to double down. And then, of course, social media, we were early adopters there, working with Twitter in 2007 to launch, a moment and an activation for them that was unique. And it took off, with our community. And so I think, there were risks we took certainly along the way, but without those risks, just like investment, you don't see the return. So I would encourage people to take those risks. And I think mistakes were made along the way, of course, but what we found was if you correct those mistakes in a timely fashion, if you acknowledge them, if you engage the community, you can very much turn that into a win. So I think social media was a huge game changer for us. Early days of Twitter and South by Southwest was a lot about coordinating with their ops teams and dealing with the fail whale, if people remember back then. we caused quite a few fail whales at the time because, you know, Twitter was very much still growing. But because we had done that, because we had brought in there was no good wireless, so we brought it in. We built out sort of Wi-Fi infrastructure because the convention center didn't have it at the time. So I went and found experts in that area and convinced them to help me create that, because my thesis there was without that connectivity, without that hyper connectivity, that our audience, particularly we had an early adopter audience, we wouldn't retain them. They couldn't stay at the event. They wouldn't be able to get their work done. It wasn't like normal life. Well, it's not like normal Wi-Fi conditions when you gather thousands of people in a hyper-dense location. But, you know, because we incorporated that community, it gave us an invaluable tool to spread our message. In fact, people were spreading the message for us, which is kind of best case scenario.
That's like the planner's dream right there. Let the audience do the marketing for you in a lot of ways. By the way, I want to give some shout outs to everybody who's watching right now. We actually, we got some people here from Austin right now as well. So shout outs to everybody who's watching right now from Austin as well. So happy to have you here. Keep the questions coming in the questions panel, by the way. Upvote the ones you like the most, because I'm going to ask them directly to Scott. If you've ever watched our podcast event icons, you know I love to do that. So put your questions in and keep commenting in the chat. Keep it coming. But Scott, you talk about risk, and I think that when it comes to technology, Murphy's Law is like the number one thing. Everyone just knows something's going to go wrong. What was the biggest risk at the time or it doesn't have to be the biggest risk, but what was a big risk that you took that you thought to yourself, oh my gosh, if this doesn't pan out, it's just so risky. But now you look back on it, you're like, I'm so happy that we took that risk.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, you know,
I got the deep ones today, Scott.
Digging back through the memory banks, you know, I have to say when we first started incorporating RFID, which was, again, pretty early, 2004, we started doing RFID with our credentials. And when you're innovating in and around the credential, you're innovating around access itself, right? So, you know, your attendees, they pay for access to that content, to that session. You know, I'm talking sort of across both virtual and in real life as well. If we had messed that up, it really would have impacted us in a huge way. So there was a lot of risk there, but then immediately we saw the reward in terms of credential. We were able to understand sort of the flows of our show so much better, and the analytics internally. We're very, very careful at the time to make smart choices about data, and really sort of believed in the privacy of our attendee, and that was good. But there are times where we didn't get it quite right. So when I was thinking earlier, I was thinking about like, well, where were the failures, right? You know, those moments.
Yeah.
And I think it was early 2000s, we did QR codes for networking. And we thought we were really, you know, had this really slick thing where people could scan the QR code on each other's credential and automatically connect via a social system that we created. But we didn't get the login right. And so there was an immediate showstopper. And it made it hard for people to do that. So immediately, you know, people were trying to connect, and because they weren't automatically logged in, the system wasn't working correctly. But then that was a huge learning moment too. It was kind of like, you can put this technology in place, but if you don't make it super easy to use, if you don't get out of the way with the technology, you're not going to have the successful result that you want. So I'm not sure that entirely answers your question, but.
Yeah, no, totally. I think a lot of times, you know, when it comes to this technology, people are just, what's the worst thing that can kind of happen? So you mentioned in the QR codes, things didn't work out. Did you guys lose sales tickets? This is a loaded question. Did you lose ticket sales the next year? Was there like a gigantic flame war on Twitter? Like, what was people's reaction to this happening? And especially because we're dealing a lot with hindsight right now, which I think is one of the greatest things. Is like, when you implement this technology, it didn't work. What happened, and kind of how did you guys deal with it, and how did it react to the entire event as a whole?
Well, it created a moment around it, and in essence, because there was, you know, you sort of, you know, the bad press kind of thing. Because you've engaged your audience around that, and then you've pulled it in, you've made some solutions out of it, you wind up, you can turn something like that into a real win. I think the absolute worst thing you can do is hide from some sort of technical problem, right? You have to address it. You have to engage your audience. And we had, as the event had grown quite large over the years, we have a lot of hiccups, right? But it's important that you solve those very quickly and you communicate with your audience incredibly responsibly over all your communication channels that you have with them. Because what you'll find is, as long as people feel heard and you address their issue in a timely fashion, you turn them into a bigger fan. It's when you don't address that issue, it's when you let it linger, it's when it doesn't get resolved over a number of hours or days that you really risk failure.
Oh, interesting. So the quick reactivity is ultimately what helps kind of save it. They say that when it comes to good service, right, you can have like the most stellar, perfect service, but really where people talk about service, I think, like it's one of our interview questions I answer when we hire people, say like, well, tell us about your service. They never talk about the perfect scenario where it all worked perfect. They always talk about the service recovery that ends up happening. And I think that's something important to know, is that, like you're saying, it's about quick reactivity. It's about communicating in the right way as well. Okay, so let's kind of start talking about the team and how you built it up. I know your team is much bigger now, but you talked about like early days of programmers and things like that. Walk us through the evolution of your team and kind of what were key hires that you made along the way that really helped make a big impact in making things easier or, being able to stay innovative. Kind of talk about your team evolution over the years.
Okay, I'd love that. It really started with kind of just me. There were maybe one or two other people that had some technical ability. But what I found very early on was that if you're doing something even, you can get other people to join you in that effort. And so I hired programmers because they gave me an immediate return on functionality. And over the years, South by Southwest has built a lot of software because it didn't exist. I think now we're in a much different phase where there's so much event technology. You've got like a ton of choices. We would have made different choices had that been the case. But what we saw is that no one's going to care about your event more than you do. Okay. If you have somebody on your staff who has the technical capability to address an issue when it's happening, whether that issue is at 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday, or whether it's sort of at 9 a.m. Monday morning, better off, because that person works for you and you can immediately jump in, you can address it. And I think, in the best case scenario, you've got technology partners that are that responsive. But often that's a very high bar to ask for, particularly if you're working with an event technology company that's got a lot of clients, you're just kind of another client. How do you become the most important client during that time? So I think that building that internal capability really gave us an immediate payoff. And it also sort of helped us educate ourselves, and it also created opportunities for us to do things that weren't possible with the marketplace. I think as we pivoted the RFID program, we quickly pivoted to building our own solution. And why is couldn't find in the market something that our needs, where we had a lot of distributed venues, we needed that to be real-time, wireless, reporting, and we found that for a relatively sort of, in retrospect, modest budget, we were able to build that and sort of reap the rewards of that over time in terms of the functionality. So I think I can't say enough good things about building internal capabilities, because I think that's something that you'll see in a continued return on your investment.
Mm. For someone who's maybe scared of building things, right? They're really comfortable with the idea of, yeah, outsourcing, hiring event technology companies to do this sort of stuff. How would you start to not just dip your toe in the water, hire somebody off of Upwork or something like that? How would you How would you rebuild that team? Starting to make that happen for someone who maybe is afraid of that.
Well, let's say I was building it today, right? So you've got just a surplus of event technology tools. And in some ways, there's so many tools. The real question is like, what do I use? What's right for me? How do I go about that? And this is something that Here and Tomorrow, my new company that I founded, is really keen to address, because there is so much innovation that's happened in the industry over the last, I think particularly accelerated over the last 12 months. Everybody can nod their head and say, yes, there's been a lot, but now there's also a lot of noise, right? And so like, what do I pick? How do I choose it? So I think the first thing you should consider doing in terms of an internal team is project management. And I say project management because a technical project manager knows enough technology to be able to work with your vendors in a smart way. And then in terms of vendor selection, again, from that basis of project management, you've got a foundation to start making decisions. That won't get you the whole way there. But if I had like one hire today, and if I was an event organizer, I would hire a technical project manager for those reasons, because they can take you through integrations, they have enough knowledge to communicate with vendors, and this area is can be quite technical. And so if you're like, I'm not a technology person, I'm an event owner, and I want to do this, you need a go-to person on your staff. That's a very versatile position to focus on.
That's awesome. I definitely love that advice too, that sometimes you need that translator. And also, yeah, like when it comes to project management, someone who can keep the timelines moving in the right direction sometimes too, because sometimes you go,
Absolutely.
oh yeah, we're gonna implement this technology and it can take like years and so much time to build and implement. Someone that gets it done. So we got an awesome question from the audience. By the way, again, I'm taking your questions.
Great.
I'm also looking at the chat right now. We got some people from Florida and New York City here. Also somebody who says, let's see, I actually think I can pull up names. James, who says programmers rule as well. And I agree, James. So question from the audience, what's the must-have piece of event technology? And then there's a second part of the question I'm going to get to right after this. But if you have the must-have person as the technical project manager, what's the must-have technology do you think when it comes to it? This is a big question.
Must have. Well, I think you need to have the capability to create content. So if you're not creating, you're really missing a huge opportunity to extend your brand and to build your audience and for marketing for next year, right? So got to have that. Two, if people can't connect with each other, I think the must-have ones around connectivity. Why do people go to events? I feel like people really go to events because they want to connect with other people and they want to do business with that person. They want to learn from that person. They want to see, is there an opportunity for them and their aspirations? So if you're not providing connectivity, and that could come in the form of something as simple as Wi-Fi at your event, something as simple as, or a little more complicated in terms of a bespoke sort of messaging platform for people to connect with. But people don't live their life. Like, let's just take the in real experience, right? Let's just isolate that for a minute. They don't live their in real life experience without their phone, right? They're always communicating on their phone. They're in person and they're digital. And we saw these trends early on at South by Southwest because of the early adopters when the iPhone came out, and we immediately got a return on our investment in terms of creating that Wi-Fi infrastructure, because AT&T struggled that first year when they had this massive density of iPhone users in 2009. And it was kind of like a whoa moment, but because we had the Wi-Fi, we had made the investment, people could still connect, and that was key. So just because, even if you're not doing virtual at the same time, a lot of people are talking about hybrid. I think that's absolutely the direction to go. It's about connectivity. So if people don't have great connectivity and platforms to connect with each other on, you're not going to succeed. That's my opinion.
I love it. I love it. It's a foundational basis to like build everything else on top of. So like, yeah, if you don't have that, it's just, you're kind of building a straw house that's going to get blown over at the slightest bit of technology change, right? You mentioned this, and I'll start teasing into some good stuff for you all. So so one of the second half of the question was, how has this changed, especially now with COVID changing? But I think 100% that you nailed it. Is that it's about content and having all these good things on here too. But let's talk about the story and the journey towards virtual. And for most people who don't know this, like South by, and we'll get to hybrid for sure, but South by has been doing hybrid events before like hybrid events were even a thing. We'll definitely have to go to the story to talk about how you guys have broadcasted over the years and things like that. But how has the event changed over this last year? Because you guys had to make the same pivot everybody else did. You guys were actually a big part of the story that around our whole industry, in deciding to make this shift and make everything happen. How has the last year changed? And was there anything that you thought to yourself like, oh my gosh, like, thank God we did this before because now we have this. But yeah, talk us through your journey of going virtual this past year and kind of the last year for South by.
Sure, I'd love to. So obviously it was a big moment. I mean, as it dawned on me as South by Southwest 2020 got canceled kind of days before the event, which was, you know, heartbreaking, but also like, thank God in some ways, in terms of the trajectory of the pandemic. But once I got past that, it was like, we have to do a South by Southwest that's going to be virtual. And we didn't really know the trajectory of things. And, those were, I don't know, like really blurry days a little bit. But, I was enormously grateful that we had done all this streaming over the years, that we had really felt passionate about bringing the streaming capability. So we're very comfortable with streaming technologies. We're very comfortable with that. And we'd also done a lot in terms of emerging technology, in terms of embracing mobile and Bluetooth. And you mentioned, beacons before. And we had some great technology partners already in place and people that we've worked with. And at the same time, I think we were very well positioned in terms of making that leap. The year was, obviously a very challenging year for everybody in the event industry, but at the same time, it was such, looking at silver lining, such a moment for innovation. And there was no like, what is the right way to do a virtual event? Figuring it out. And so there's this experimentation, and that's an area I'm very comfortable in, the sort of experimentation and like, let's try it, test and learn. So it was a really thrilling opportunity in many, many ways. And, we worked really collaboratively across the organization. We really highlighted domain experts to kind of work together. And we worked to produce South by Southwest Online 2021 for mobile, web, connected TV on Apple TV, Fire TV, Roku, Samsung TV, Android TV, and we had an XR environment as well for our VER users out there. So, it was very much about creating access. And the amazing thing about virtual events is if you have a global audience or you want a global audience, so there's such a lower barrier to entry. You don't have to travel there. You don't have to invest large sums of money to stay in a place when you're trying to travel there. And so you have access to this content community and subject matter from anywhere in the world. And that's a phenomenal opportunity for event organizers in terms of expansion of their brand.
Yeah. Well, you hinted at the idea that you guys had like the Roku app and TV, and I think that your history with broadcast is also really important because a lot of today we're talking about how do we make engaging live streams. And it's like, think like a TV producer, but you guys were thinking about being a TV producer before we started talking about this year. Can you talk about what sort of lessons you learned along the way in terms of broadcast and your live streams and your live stream technologies and also literally TV broadcasting as well, and kind of lessons you learned along the way that really helped make the event impactful?
Sure, that's a great question as well. I think that when we started doing video in 2000, right? It wasn't live streaming. It was sort of MPEG 4s that were like this big, you know, they were just like tiny on the screen. And, you know, that was, I think, an important signal. You like it also because the South by brand is very much about entertainment. It's about the film industry, the music industry. It's about interactive. You know, that sort of lends itself, I think, towards the aspirations of doing streaming. But now it's become so normalized. There's so many new technologies to be able to use. It's actually a huge benefit to be able to pick from them. I think that when it comes to streaming, you have to have contingency plans. You have to, because a moment, like a few seconds of dead air is like forever, right? And, you know, and I think that when you think about like the live stream, it's not working, immediately 300 people will tell you it's not working. And, you know, it's of the moment. That's what makes it so prescient. What makes it so great and so alive, is that we're in the moment, which is, you know, I think a great essence of life. But at the same time, if you're not prepared with like a plan B, a plan C, then you're going to get stung. And so I think you've really got to think through those escalations and contingency steps. And we learned that early on. And I think that's an important lesson for all event producers.
I love it. I love it. All right, let's dive into some more audience Q&A questions that we have coming in. So when it comes to technology, there's so much stuff to do, especially, I mean, we're talking about like sometimes just barely getting into it. You guys kind of had like the ability to tap into anything, right? Like you guys got Twitter before Twitter was like even a thing, right? But how do you decide what technologies to implement? And what's your decision-making process look around those? For example, have you ever had it where a technology came to you and you said, too early, let's pass? And kind of what does that decision-making process look like for you all?
Yeah, I think, you know, it really needs to flow from your goals, right? So I would say you've got to take a step back. You can't make technology decisions without really revisiting the goals of your event, the goals of your brand. What is your brand identity? What are you projecting in terms of that? What is your mission? What are your goals? And who is your audience? Without those key signals, you're going to make the wrong choices. So I think you've got to go back to really thinking about what are we at our essence? Why are we doing this? And then that will help guide you. So, you know, if you've got a large event, stakes are high. You've got a big audience. What kind of other events has that technology company done of your scale? That would be a key signal I would look for, like their demonstrated scalability. Who have they worked with successfully? Talk to those people, and then you'll kind of get a sense of that. And I think that, you know, if you are positioning your technology in line with your brand identity, you're going to be in good shape. What does your audience want? You know, and if you're not focused on what your audience wants, you're kind of missing the boat there, because isn't that what we're doing? We're bringing together an audience. And we're creating a shared experience for that audience. So I think you've really got to kind of narrow in on that. And it sounds, I think it sounds like, well, okay, that makes sense, but you really need to put the work in there. And I think you got to get that alignment across your team and across your organization, because it's really easy for people to have different goals and to be misaligned, and you have something that you think is like a big hit that somebody else thinks it didn't meet their needs. So spend that time across the organization, really aligning on shared goals and what we want to deliver for the audience. And that'll give you a lot of rewards.
I love it. You know, we always talk about going back to goals, and I think just hearing it from you just solidifies that even further, that like we have to be so laser focused on those goals 100%. Next question, and this one's gonna be kind of hard, I know, because you know, obviously it's been a couple years since you probably have had to massively worry as much about resources as say, but a lot of planners right now are asking, how can smaller events harness new technology without a ton of resources? I'm guessing they mainly mean budget, but I'm sure they mean also a little bit of people side of things, but you know, lack of resources. What do you do?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, first of all, more people doesn't make it better. Okay, I think we got to get away from that. Like I went, like in the last 4 years, really small in my career, right? You know, I went from managing a lot of people when I was a chief technology officer to managing just a handful, and really putting in the time with those individuals to create lots of opportunities for intense engagement, ideation, brainstorming, exploration, R&D, right? And so I'm a big fan of small teams because, you know, often when you sort of just add bodies, it doesn't help. It creates more communication. There's more that gets lost. You're not increasing your efficiency. You're not increasing your productivity. And so all that's good, okay? And then I think that you really kind of have to look at sort of what is the scale. If you're really pressed for resources on a budgetary sense, you should look at some of the all-in-one platform solutions. Some of them can be quite spendy depending on sort of what size audience and what you're doing. I also think that like just focus on what is the most key to you. If it's your exhibitors, innovate there, right? I think if you can align your technology choices with your revenue streams, then the management and the organization is going to feel even more comfortable about increasing the budgets to do that because they can see an immediate return on investment. So you have to like draw the line between technology spending and the return on that investment. And you should set KPIs, key performance indicators, and kind of align on that in your organization. And you can get budgets increased if the revenue increases. And so that's one really easy technique to sort of look at when it comes to resource allocation.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we get new technology, I'm totally to blame for this in 100% of the way, but like we see new technology and we go, oh my God, new shiny, let's just go ahead and implement it. And you might implement it, might be successful, but if you don't have that follow-up, like you said, to measure the ROI and the numbers and those KPIs on there, then it feels like the next time you go and ask for it again, you're going to say, well, what was the effect? And they might attribute maybe the success you created to something else rather than your KPIs potentially, which I think is really, really interesting on there. We get tons and tons of questions. Keep them coming. Only a couple minutes left, but I'm going to selfishly ask one question that I had, and I like to say it got upvoted as a top question. So it sounds like other people want to know the answer as well. But Scott, now reflecting back on this massive journey that you've gone on, it's like so fresh. So that's why I'm so excited to ask this question.
It's been a wild ride, let me tell you.
What's your proudest achievement when it comes to technology, when it comes to South by? I know that's a big question.
Say the virtual event we just produced, because it was 5 channels, streaming hours a day on 5 connected TV apps, mobile, web, and XR. And I think that, you know, for us, creating that sort of variety of platform was really difficult. And then pulling together that volume of content, like just with a couple weeks left in production, Texas got hit by this crazy winter storm that knocked out all the power and watered everybody's house. And it was like, you know, really robbed us of like 5 or 6 production days right before the event. It was a Herculean effort. That made me incredibly proud that we were able to deliver such a high quality experience for tens of thousands of people to engage. And then I think, you know, like oftentimes I would think about like we created a lot of personalization in terms of, you know, there's unique dynamics, particularly with the South by Southwest event. You've got 600 venues, 7,000 events in 2019. I'm going back to 2019, the last sort of in real life event. And, you know, you've got this like tens of thousands of people and you're trying to distribute them across like all of these 600 venues. Each has a capacity of like 200, maybe 2,000 on the big end. How do you do that? So we created a lot of dynamic personalization and we leveraged a lot of geofencing technologies in order to deliver really timely recommendations that were aligned with people's personal profiles. That I think was really cool because it's sort of like nudging people into discovery, right? You know, if you've got an event and you've probably got your top marquee things, but you don't need everybody just to do the marquee things, right? Particularly if you've got a limited capacity like you do in person. So you want to create discovery and moments of inspiration. You want to also be able to pay, like, pay attention, get that attention paid to your speakers and to your people who are participating, so they feel like it was worthwhile making the commitment of the time. So be able to create tools for discovery and to do that really well dynamically in real time, that made me pretty proud.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Okay, I'd have probably time for one more question to be able to ask, and I'll give a chance. Obviously, you have this new venture, Here and Tomorrow, which I love that name, by the way, because it's all about like, hey, it's here now and it's moving forward. We didn't even get a chance. I didn't even hear the name last time we talked, so I'm like stoked for it. But let's talk about the future. Everything's starting to kind of in the United States kind of return back to normal. Everybody's talking hybrid. And, I think things have really changed in this last year. Where do you kind of see the future going? And kind of, I also give a chance, I think this is a great moment to say, hey, what was Here and Tomorrow doing about that? And what's kind of the future unfold? And where do you see the future going, Scott?
Yeah, I think, well, it's an enormous moment of innovation for the industry. And I think as opposed to the last 12 months where you're sort of forced to innovate, you can't do in real life events and you're like, innovate or die, right? And now we've got all this incredible investment that's come into event technology and into shared experiences. And everyone talks about hybrid, but nobody really knows what hybrid is because it hasn't been defined yet. So that's a huge moment of opportunity that's so inspiring. And Here and Tomorrow is really about helping create these shared sort of hybrid experiences for event owners or working with event technology companies in terms of positioning and sort of new opportunities there. I think that's incredibly thrilling. So I think that what you're going to see is people are still going to want to be able to access your event virtually, right? So you better do something. And I think that like being able to draw in that audience, expand your audience, your reach, and maybe they don't come in person this year, but maybe they come in person next year. It also, I think, rather than just say, well, we have to do it, our money then sort of like in real life, because that's the business that we've created. I think there's moments where you can really create sort of new revenue streams there. People talk about that. It's hard to do, and certainly something that my company is really looking at. And I think that it's an exciting time for the event industry because we're going to see people even more engaged. They've gotten more engaged in digital. They're going back to in real life period right now. They're going to stay engaged in digital, and being able to deliver shared experiences to anyone in the world in real time is a thrilling proposition if you're an event producer. And there's a lot of market entrants who can help you do that. The question is, which ones are right for me?
That's the fun part of it all. So, okay, I think we're coming right to the very end. Scott, one last quick question is, where can people kind of follow you, find out what you're up to, and stay in tune to where you're going now in the future?
Well, you can always find me on LinkedIn, of course, and also hereandtomorrow.com is my website. You can also drop me a line, drop me an email, scott@hereandtomorrow.com. I really look forward to engaging with all of you, and I'll be part of the event all week. So you can reach out to me through the Event Tech Live platform.
I love it. I love it. Let's make some huge amount of noise for Scott right now in the chat, in the Q&A. Let's put your favorite emojis, put your favorite onomatopoeias, boom, wow, kazam. Let's get some clap emojis going. Let's make some noise, Scott. This has been such an incredible conversation. So honored that I get a chance to just hear the story and get to share it with the rest of the world, and also share your insights for where the future may go and what's to come for the future of event technology. Scott, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Guys,
Well,
thank you
James,
very much.
welcome
Will,
back.
Scott, What a session. Thank you very much. Will, thanks for holding the fort for me. I was just on one of the other stages there, fielding some Q&A with Matt Franks from DRPG in a great session, but I knew that we were in capable hands with you and Scott on this particular stage. Guys, it's been great to have you here. And just to echo some of the stuff that Will was saying, reach out to both of these guys. If you want to connect with Scott, great. But equally, Will's got loads of stuff that he can offer. So if you're tuning in today and you're an attendee of Event Tech Live, USA and Canada 21, then please do go to the event platform, connect with these guys, keep the questions flowing, keep the conversations flowing. Let's see where you are. And I just thought you might like to know, guys. We've got a lot of people tuning in from all over the place. We've got Quebec, New York City, Scott, Austin, Texas has been tuning in. Guys in the UK, Italy, Bologna is still online and watching the session at the moment, and some great comments for you guys. So thank you to you both. Our guest, Scott Wilcox, founder at Here and Tomorrow, LLC, and of course, our good friend Will Curran, Chief Event Einstein at Endless Events, looking at the journey through the years at South by Southwest. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Will. Thanks, James.